I'm Rob Skinner, and this is the Rob Skinner Podcast. Today I'm talking to Natalie Do. Natalie emigrated to the U.S. as a high school student from Hong Kong. She went to Portland State University where she became a Christian, and from there she went overseas to live and work as a missionary in Japan and then Vietnam. She married her husband, Dat Do, and they led the church in Ho Chi Minh City. She returned to the States and went into banking where she has risen to become a vice president of Torrey Pines Bank. Find out more on the Rob Skinner Podcast. Welcome back to the Rob Skinner Podcast. My goal is to inspire you to live a no-regrets life, make this life count, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Thanks so much for joining the program today. I am looking forward to talking to Natalie Do. And if you're listening to this, I am probably on sabbatical somewhere and enjoying a good time to rest and recharge the spiritual batteries. I want to encourage you this fall in October, we're going to have the Climb Small Church Leadership Conference in Michigan. And so I really hope you can make it. It's going to be the first weekend in October. So please join us for the Climb Small Church Leadership Conference. It's going to be fantastic. Natalie, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
You were born and raised in Hong Kong. How'd you end up in the Pacific Northwest?
I really wanted to stay in Hong Kong and continue to go on to universities, but the option was very limited. Hong Kong had 8 million people, and at the time, there were only 2 major universities. And a lot of my friends were thinking about, studying overseas, and I thought, hey, why not? That sounds exciting. And so I applied. I actually became an exchange student to Southern Oregon for the last year in high school. And talking about culture shock, I went from the city jungle to a small town of less than 2,000 people. And I learned how to ride horses, raise pigs, raise cows, and shoot guns, cut down your own Christmas tree. And it's a total contrast, but major culture shock, and what a fun time. And then after that, I thought about continuing on to university. And since I was already in the States, I applied, and I really love the state of Oregon. Oregon is such a beautiful state, as you would attest to that. So I ended up being in Portland State. I also got into University of Oregon, but it was so funny when I did the tour and I looked around. At the time, U of O wasn't as popular as today. At the time, I looked around and I was like, there's nothing except just fields and fields and fields. And the cow smell was so strong. I'm like, I'm not going to school here. And I wasn't majoring in agricultural science or anything. And then Portland was perfect because it's a city, it's urban, it's really cool. The vibe was amazing. And I'm like, I can really live here. So I decided to go to Portland State. And, as you know, God had a plan too, because at the time, University of Oregon did not have our church there. And guess what? Somebody planted the Portland church the same time that I was going to school there. And that's how we met. I met Pam at a campus devotional, and I know I'm jumping ahead, so you want me just to go ahead and it's really, get right into it?
I appreciate it. I mean, it's really true. University of Oregon, Eugene is not, when you look around, especially if you're coming from Hong Kong, that's so dense in terms of population, to go to University of Oregon and Oregon State. Right. They're both, just out in the middle of a valley, and it's a very fertile valley, the Willamette Valley, but there's really nothing there. I mean, it's like, it's become popular because of Nike and Phil Knight and the money that's been put into it, the football and the basketball program. But really, let's face it, it's very agricultural area and very, if you like wide open spaces, it's a great place. But Portland
Right.
State it's a little secret. I mean, Portland State is the largest college in Oregon. It's the most populated. And it's right downtown Portland. It's just beautiful. It's
Yeah.
right there. And so,
Right.
well, tell me, how did you get invited to church? How did you become a Christian?
So I grew up in a Catholic school because Hong Kong was a British colony. Especially during my time, it was huge in going to Catholic public school, wearing uniforms, and I remember having to recite prayers before and after school. There's a chapel in the school on the top floor, and we would go and hang out and pretend we're praying, pretend we're having our service when we were young, and we didn't know what was going on. So I was always interested in religions. My family is more like Taoism, so you worship deities, and there's a God in the kitchen, there's a God in the living room, and there's all kinds of gods watching you, watching over you in like all sorts of ways. And when I went to Southern Oregon as an exchange student, I was living with a Mormon family. So that was mega interesting. I was actually quite open-minded. I gave it a shot. And I decided that, that's not the truth that I was seeking. I'm being politically correct here.
Right.
and then and then when I went to Portland State, that is already by that time I had visited at least 30 churches
Wow.
because I was really seeking. I would hop on the bus. I would ask people to give me a ride because I didn't have a car at the time. I just wanted to find the true church, whatever that meant to me. I just knew that somewhere in the back of my mind, I needed to get baptized. I needed to know God, and I wasn't living a life full of sins. I was a typical young Asian woman who was very sheltered. But there's something inside me that was like yearning for something more eternal, something more spiritual. And so, of course, I was staying. I was staying with my Mormon family. One of the sisters lived in Beaverton. I was staying in their apartment, and of course, they knew I was looking for a church. And of course, they wanted me to go with them. And they said, "But you know what? You lived with us for a year. We didn't convert you. You're not going to be converted now." They were really realistic about it. And they said, "Hey, there's a new church that just came to Portland, and they were going door to door inviting people. And I think it's every Thursday night at 7:30. It's an apartment 2B." And I still remember. And it was a singles Bible talk. And I was like, 18 years old, super like by myself, a foreign student, and all I had was a suitcase of whatever. And I was like, "Okay, thank you for letting me know." And I had no idea who it was. I didn't have any phone number. So the very next Thursday evening at 7:30, I grabbed my Bible. At the time, there was no, we're old. This is 1991. So I grabbed my Bible and I just walked over to apartment 2B, and I thought, there's nothing to lose. It's the same apartment. If they're murderers, I can scream. And so I just knocked on the door. They closed the door already. And this guy, James Fraser, opened the door. And I think it was James, yeah. And he opened the door and he was shocked. It's like, who is this? And then I literally invited myself to the Bible talk. And then the next night, so it was a Thursday, right? And the next night is one of the first campus devotional that you and Pam put together. And it was funny because I didn't have a car and they arranged a ride for me, but they dropped me off at the Corbett House in Southwest Portland where Cindy Combs, and,
Right.
and Katie, you remember those names. And
Oh, yeah.
so I got dropped off there to a bunch of like strangers, all these women that are really cool. And Cindy was like, "Oh, who are you?" And I said, "Well, I just got dropped off. I was supposed to go to like a campus thing, and then Katie dropped me off, and I had no idea how I was going to get home. All that was a blur to me, but it was so much fun, and that's when I first attended the campus devotional. I met you and Pam, and then of course Pam approached me and she's like, "Would you like to study the Bible?" And I said, "Of course, yes." And I still remember at that time I had no idea what a minister was. And she opened up her schedule book, the planner, right? And she's like, "When would you like to get together?" And It was so funny. My first thought was, because remember, I'm from Hong Kong, right? People are busy, you know. I looked at her calendar and I made a comment and I'm like, wow, you got nothing going on. So, and she said, well, you're my priority. And so we set up Bible studies like almost every day. And I was one of those. I think it took me like 10 days and it was like no brainer. So, and then at the time, we weren't open-minded enough for women to baptize. So you baptized me in the river. That was October 13, 1991. It was a glorious day.
That was
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, I remember that devotional and you coming and I preached a lesson and I remember you responding. We had like some comments and I remember you standing up and saying, "We need to evangelize Portland State University. We got to reach out. We got to make a difference here." And I'm like, it was like you were so confident. I was like, "Who is this woman?" And then
I had no idea what I was talking about. I was just excited. What does it mean to evangelize? I don't know. It
Oh
sounded
my,
good.
oh my gosh. One of the things that became clear early on right there and that I've seen throughout the years is you are extremely confident and you speak your mind. Where does that confidence come from, Natalie?
I think that back then the confidence came from ignorance. I didn't know. And I was also the youngest of 10. I have 9 brothers and sisters, right? And in order to survive, being the youngest of 10, you got to be bold. You know, if you want that chicken wing, you got to go for it. You can't wait because there's 9 other people plus your parents. It's like over 10 people at the table trying to grab the best piece of meat, you know. Um, I also did a lot of singing. I was in dancing. So I did a lot singing, dancing, swimming, track, basketball, volleyball. It's not that normal as a young Asian female student to be involved in all those. I was also in speech. I was on TV when I was 12. A lot of stuff. So I think that gave me a lot of confidence. But when I was younger, when I first met you when I was 18, that confidence came from ignorance. I didn't really know a whole lot. I was just confident because I was on stage. I was not afraid. But I would say the confidence I have today is from knowing God. Is also, you know, the older you get, the more you realize you don't know. So it also comes from a place of ignorance, but it's a wiser way of looking at ignorance. Like, hey, I don't know. So I'm confidently saying, well, Rob, I didn't understand what you just shared. Can you explain to me? That's more coming from a humility side of ignorance. I think that's where my confidence comes from.
Well, let's just back it up a little bit. 10 kids. Hong Kong is not known for its large homes. How big was your home? What did your dad do to support 10 kids? What did that look like?
Well, we were raised in government housing, like a lot of people. So my place was 2 apartments adjacent to each other. You think, oh, 2 apartments? No, they're like tofu size, like a standard, like the bedroom I'm in now, like 10 by 10. So 5 will be here, and then 5 in the other room. So you have no bedroom. You have nothing really, and I never had my own bed. You just sleep wherever there's space. So God prepared me for the mission trip to Japan, I guess.
My gosh. That's crazy. Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so
But you know what, Rob? That is not unique. America's big space is not normal. Most population on our planet do live like that.
okay, so you became a Christian there in Portland. Okay, what led you to return to Asia? I mean, it's really I got to hand it to you. Leaving home in high school and then staying away, going to college, and that just shows incredible confidence. Then you become a Christian. What led you to return to Asia?
I think there's like a theme in this podcast is that the Skinners made a lot of decision for me. I think when I was in college, I visited you guys, and David was just a baby. And I think you were living in Nishi-Eifuku, right? And I visited you guys. I was on my way to Hong Kong to see my family, and I loved Japan. It's like love at first sight. And then when I graduated, I started working. My first job was Airwear USA, which I have a story for that. It's the US distributor and marketing company for Doc Martens shoes from London. Used to be called London Underground. And when I graduated, I started working there. And then you and I and Pam, we were talking, and you were like, why don't you move to Tokyo and be part of the international ministry? We can really use you here. And at the time, I was like, okay, that sounded weird because I am not Japanese. I don't speak Japanese. But I always had, I always had it in my mind that wherever God calls me, I'll do it. I always had that attitude. I mean, there's nothing more clear than when someone asks you to leave, to move. So I thought, okay, that was a sign. So I decided to leave and, wrap up my job and move to Tokyo, Japan without a job there, but knowing that God, somehow would bless me with it. And I like to share this quick story with you. The biggest cost account to leave my life in Portland, Oregon. This might sound really silly, but it's really painful for me, and it's going to be very laughable for you and your audience. When I was at Airway USA, I created their consumer return program, so I left a legacy there. It was a very fun job, right out of college, the best job ever. You can wear whatever, they give you Starbucks and coffee people and bagels every day. I mean, as a young college graduate, that was just the first, amazing job, best experience. But what was so funny now, many, many years later, I look back, the most difficult thing was, you can call me worldly or not, but this is real. This is really real. I was in charge of sample sale as well, and I wear sample size, which is UK4. And sample shoes at the time was only $5. So I get the first dip looking at all these fascinating, amazing, one-of-a-kind sample shoes from Doc Martens. I had over 50 pairs. And you know how expensive they are. And they're unique. I mean, if I were to keep them today and sell them, it would worth thousands. So the most painful thing for me to become a missionary was to sell my Doc Marten shoes. That was so painful. I still feel the pain today. I have dreams about my collections. I have dreams about, there's a specific pair of cherry smooth Mary Jane with a chunk heels. Oh, I would die for that today, but they don't make those anymore. Anyway, everyone has a cost account, but that was my cost, is to depart from my Doc Martens collections. Anyway.
We all have our sacrifices to make, don't we?
I know.
Okay. So you moved to Japan. What year did you move to Japan?
Okay, so I think, I get my years confused, my decades confused. So 1991, I think it was around 1996.
96. Okay.
Yeah.
So you got there. What'd you do for work? What was that experience like?
Well, I camped out in your living room. Again, you're the theme of my life. I camped out in your living room for a little bit, and I, just asked around to different people and saying that I'm looking for a job. And I ended up working for Tokyo Journal, the first English magazine in Japan. And I did ad sales, and then I did internet. It was very fascinating. I remember taking my first train to go to work, and it was like 3 transit. I was wearing my high heels, doing 3 transits. And by the time I get to work, I was exhausted. I'm like, every day I have to do this. And the last right before I went into the ministry, the job I had was fantastic. I was a marketing manager for a very luxury serviced office company based in Sydney. When I was working there, they they asked me to go to different parts of the world to open offices, so I was able to travel around the world. I stayed in Manly Beach in Sydney for 3 weeks for training, met a bunch of amazing women from around the world. I just had so much fun. God has always blessed me professionally.
Yeah.
And then, when I went into the ministry, I was like, what is my pace going to be? I mean, my pay was not enough to cover my rent. That's it. I went from making this much money to like, I don't even know.
Right. Right.
It was a shock, but I was glad to do it.
Okay, so one of the things that impressed me about you is you picked up Japanese so fast. How did you learn Japanese?
Um, I One of the regrets is I never got fluent in Japanese, but I did study it. So the company I worked for is an Australian company, and the clients were international. They were mostly British, actually, and because I'm from Hong Kong, British colony, I really got along with my fellow British people. I was not required to learn Japanese, but they offer private tutor for free. I mean, I'm Chinese. Anything for free, I'll take it. So I'm like, okay. At the end of the day, at like 7 p.m., in Tokyo, back then and today's the same. I think today may be a little bit better. There's no work-life balance. You work yourself to death. It's like 12-hour day normal. So at the end of the evening at 7 p.m., my tutor would come to my office and would tutor me. That's how I learned Japanese. It's very brutal. Your brain like can't function anymore because you work all day. You took the train, you work all day, and you're just trying to learn the language. I do think that I'm blessed with languages. I do have natural talents in that. It just comes to me, quicker than normal people. But I think I'm also getting older, so please don't ask me to learn another language at this point. But there was a lot of conversations with my tutor. I told her that I didn't need to speak it perfectly. I just need to do conversational.
Right.
But this is why my Japanese never became fluent, is because at one of the events that I hosted, it was a property forum with the British Chamber of Commerce. And I had CP Richard Ellis, I have Fidelity, I have a lot of, senior level managers attending. They were mostly Americans, British, Europeans, Australians, and there were two Japanese there, two local Japanese men. And I was trying to be impressive, so I did the introduction in Japanese. And I guess my Japanese was good enough that one of the Japanese men came up to me during break, and he was talking to me in Japanese, and he asked me to fetch him coffee. Because I started hosting in Japanese, he thought I was one of the secretaries. He didn't know I was the host.
Oh my
I
gosh.
I was the host, and when he asked me to fetch him coffee, I immediately reacted. So instead of speaking in Japanese, and I just said, "Ah, gomenasai. My name is Natalie, and I'm the host of this event. Coffee is in that direction." And then he immediately said, "Oh, gomenasai, gomenasai, gomenasai." He was so embarrassed, and then he got coffee, and that's when I realized my job didn't require me to speak Japanese. I know enough Japanese to share my faith on the street, to have fellowship with the Japanese disciples in the church. I don't need to advance it. And I'm also very tired, working a lot. I mean, you knew my life. I was working a lot, trying to lead Bible studies, trying to reach out to people. If the language is the number one priority, let's not waste my energy.
Yeah. Well,
So that's the story that I always remember.
oh, that's a funny one. So he thought you were an OL, office lady.
Yeah.
Okay.
He thought I was an office lady, but it's a compliment. That means my Japanese was so good
That's
that
right.
he thought he could ask me to fetch him coffee. It's laughable today, but at the time I was quite angry inside.
I bet. How did you see God working during that time? Do you have any memories of that time where you really felt like you saw God's footprints
Where? In Tokyo?
in Tokyo during the time you were?
Japan is unique in just about every way, right? Religious speaking or not. Um, the most amazing thing about Japan is when you're out on the street, on the train, in the mall, at your office, there is absolutely no sign of God anywhere.
Yeah,
None.
absolutely.
None. And you look around, everyone's into themselves. Even before smartphones, everyone is just like, listening to their Walkman, and no one talks to each other on a train. No one laughs. It's very polite and almost like solemn, and there's no community. You really, the best way to describe it is just there's no spiritual spark. It's just kind of dull. But people are very disciplined, and the gardens are beautiful, and the people are beautiful. But you don't really sense, God's presence anywhere. But then when you walk into church midweek and Sunday, and you're like, what is this place? These Japanese are not the same as all the Japanese outside this building.
Yeah.
It's very, very obvious when Japanese become disciples, and I may just cry here. Their eyes are different, their face are glowy. And when you talk about, being a star, being a shining light to the country, the church was that shining light to that country. And it was absolutely beautiful and amazing. And that was a absolute added motivation for us to share our faith. Is people's lives are drastically different when they become disciples in Japan, more than anywhere I have seen. And I've been to a lot of places.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to describe it. I totally agree with you, Natalie. It's like a spiritual wasteland. I mean, there's no,
Yeah.
where's God? It feels so
Yeah.
empty, and it's hard to describe. I mean, you're right. People are disciplined. It's clean. It's safe. There's so many wonderful things about it, but spiritually, it's like there's no hint of God. There's no crosses that you can see. You don't see churches anywhere. It's amazing, and it can be really empty. And so you're right. The
Yeah.
church is just such a bright spot. So, okay.
Right.
So how'd you get to Vietnam? You're in Japan. I mean, you've gone to America, then you've gone back to Asia, but you've gone to Japan, then you end up in Vietnam. How did that happen?
Again, there's a couple named Rob and Pam Skinner that play a key role in that. I honestly think that because I am so strong in my own ways, I really think that if I were single today, I would be single for a long time. I don't think I can date or get married easily because I'm so strong-willed and so picky. So back then, I was dating or going on dates, but I had such a hard time opening up and be humble and open my eyes to see what my options are, right? So I'm very grateful that my relationship with Dad was literally a setup from Frank and Erica Kim, Greg and Shelley Metten, the Beaches, the Skinners. I mean, I don't know how many people were involved in setting that up. I look back and I am grateful that we were set up to go on a date. So that's how we met, is through the church, through people setting us up.
Okay. So it was long distance. He was in.
Oh, yeah. He was in Vietnam at the time. And then we became good friends. Back then, we kept in touch via email. It was dial up, I remember.
Right.
And after that, he was struggling with being on a mission field. And then he went back to the States and he ended up in San Francisco. So, and when he was in San Francisco, he came to Tokyo to speak. And we spent time, and then we went steady, and we went long distance. It was November, I think. And then soon after that, he moved to Japan. We got engaged. We both joined the ministry, full-time ministry, with the plan that we would go back to Vietnam and lead the church there. So it's funny because it was a setup, but I also knew that if I were getting serious with Dad, I would have to move to Vietnam. And it was never my plan. It was never my plan to go to Japan. It was never my plan to go to Vietnam. All these things were way out of my brain at the time. But again, I have this thing, God calls me, I do it.
That's right. That's right. Okay. So then you moved to Vietnam. What year did you get married? And then when did you move to Vietnam?
1999, July 24th, we got married. And then we went to Vietnam literally the next day. Literally.
Honeymoon in Ho Chi Minh City.
Oh, actually, no, that's a lie. Not directly, but the mission and the whole thing started the day after we got married. And so imagine we're newlyweds and we couldn't receive any gifts. So we asked people to give us cash. And by the way, you ask people to give cash, you end up receiving more. Just a tip right there. So we carried everything that we own, which is like, 4 suitcases of whatever. And we went to Cebu, Philippines, because there was a conference there. And so we had our honeymoon in Cebu and then a conference. And right after we went to Seoul, Korea for training with the Beige for about, I think, 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And we moved around to different places and learned a lot. And then we moved to Ho Chi Minh City and we were staying in really cheap hotels until we get housing. It was a whirl. We're living off of suitcases for like weeks.
Right. Okay. So Dad had already been there. He was there for the mission planting back in 94, I believe. And so he was coming back. You guys were married. Okay. Just give me your first initial impressions of arriving in Saigon or Ho Chi Minh City.
Sticky. Humidity.
Okay.
Yeah. Your whole face melts. and you feel like the humidity just zapped all your energy. And but I remember getting out of the airport. Back then, it wasn't as organized or clean as today. So the humidity, just attacks you right away. And then the whole church came out. And of course, I didn't speak a word of Vietnamese at the time. And so I just, hello, xin chào, xin chào. That's all I could say. And just hug everybody. It was also love at first sight. The sisters, the brothers were amazing. It took no effort to love them. They were just amazing. You just look at them and you're like, this is a place that I would live forever and give my heart. So that's just how it was for me. It was very natural. It wasn't a sacrifice. It wasn't a denial. I think my heart was already in the right place, and it was just kind of. It was just there. It was very natural.
Okay, so you get there. You had to pick up the language. How'd you do that? How'd you acquire the language quickly?
Okay, so in Japan, I wasn't required to speak Japanese. In Vietnam, I was on my own terms. Now, a lot of times when people become missionaries, you don't have to speak the local language to be successful. But for me, I made it my goal that I would do it. So it was my own requirement for myself. And so I hired a private tutor. She would, in Vietnam, is very cheap. And so she came to my house and started conversing. To me, it's not important that I write, it's important that I speak. So I focus on the speaking part. And she was really amazing. And she came 2 times a week. And then I said, let's pick it up. So we did like 5 times a week. And then to my surprise, I became pretty fluent in about 3 months. To my surprise, and because I was really eager, and my motivation is this: I started doing Bible studies, and I would, do it in English, and then a sister would translate into Vietnamese, and somehow I just knew she wasn't translating it correctly, and I'm like, this is the word of God. It cannot be wrong. It just cannot be wrong. So I thought, the best way to ensure that this is done correctly is not to ask the sisters to up their English, is for me to up my Vietnamese. So I started I don't care how foolish I looked, and I just speak it. And I allow people to correct me, and I want people to correct me when I don't speak it correctly. And I became fluent. I was able to preach, to be able to study the Bible, to be able to have very deep time, I think within 6 months.
Okay, so what, what did it help you that you spoke Cantonese already growing up? I mean, were there points of crossover where it's like, okay, this is helpful? Are there similarities in the language? I mean, that's really fast that you're picking it up in 3 to 6 months.
Yeah. So I grew up speaking Cantonese as my native, and then I had to learn English because Hong Kong was a British colony. And I was in a pilot program to learn Mandarin when I was in elementary school. So I grew up speaking 3 languages. And Vietnamese has a lot of similarities to Chinese. It's kind of like Spanish and French, right? It's different, but you still have to learn it. I would say there are, a good number of high-level vocabularies that are similar in sound. For example, and this is also Japanese too, right? Um, Telephone in Japanese is denwa. In Cantonese is dinwa. Vietnamese is điện thoại.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so there are some that's great. That's super helpful. But still you learned it so fast. Okay.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, so can you share some inspiring stories of how you saw God work? What inspired you? Like share some times when you just felt like, whoa, this is God totally laying the blessing down here.
I think that when I first arrived in Vietnam, I was well prepped by you guys, the Kims, the Mattons. You guys did a great job preparing my heart, and Shirley Matten did an amazing job helping me to understand what impacts people's hearts. It's not the number of people you share. It's not how bold you are. It's not how committed you are, how hard you work. It's about how you connect with others. And I have done a lot of things when I was in Vietnam, focusing on connecting the hearts. So I remember making 3 dinners. 5 p.m., 7 p.m., and 9 p.m., 3 groups of people coming to my house. I really upped my cooking skills and baking skills. I focused on being hospitable, having people over, because Vietnam, in today is still the same. It's very illegal to gather. So it's an underground church, right? So you can't just go out, share your faith. And so I just cook, and I invite the sisters and the brothers to bring their friends over, and we just have a meal. And when you share love, that's when Christ it just comes out.
Right.
It's not from anything. It's really from love. So we did a ton of that, and I see, we just went back to Vietnam actually a few weeks ago. I see the same thing, when we have people gather together, eating, fellowshipping, and you just feel the vibe of God. You just know that this is God's house. But I have to say that the Vietnamese people are very resilient and very talented, very committed, very passionate. They are really, really faithful despite of obstacles, despite of the church being illegal. At the time, there was no cell phone. There's cell phone, but there's no smartphone. And we would be able to gather together and have different groups meeting together in different parts of the city and worship. Because of underground nature, we have to keep everything fluid and flexible. So we don't know where church is going to meet until like an hour before. And then somehow it would be 100% attendance. Everyone was there in the karaoke. We would sing karaoke and then have service. And somehow, some way, we were growing and thriving without a lot of the fancy buildings or structures that you're thinking about. It's just pure heart, just heart. That's it.
Wow. That's awesome. Okay. So what brought you back to the States? You've gone to the US, back to Asia, back to the States. What brought you back this time?
Stomachache. It sounds funny, but it really is. So I later in life I learned something called endometriosis. It's the lining of your uterus growing or found outside of your uterus. So each month when you have your period, it's very painful. And I had that condition since I started my period as a young girl, and I didn't know that until Dad and I were trying to get pregnant, and we were infertile. And in 2003, my endometriosis, at the time I didn't know, but I had such painful periods. And then I was very, very skinny, and I actually could see the lump in my lower abdomen, that the endometriosis was so big, I could see it. That's how big it was. I thought it was cancer. I was scared to death, and went into the emergency room, and then they said, "Oh, you have endometriosis." I said, "Endo what?" and so, and she was French. It was in Ho Chi Minh City at an international clinic. She was French, and I couldn't understand her accent. And so I tried to understand what that was. And then I literally had to fly to Bumamgrat, Thailand, Bumamgrat Hospital for an emergency meeting with the doctors there. And then they said, we don't have the facilities, we don't have the knowledge to help you do a reconstructive surgery. We would just have a hysterectomy. You will not be able to have children. If you're from America, you should do this in America. So we flew back to LA, and during that flight, I think I was on so much pain meds. It looked like Dad kidnapped me on the plane. I had no memory of that plane ride. I had to have a doctor's note, and I think he was carrying me, and I was just like hallucinating during that flight. We landed at LAX when we went straight to UCLA emergency room and literally had an emergency surgery. And thank God for medical science. They were able to do reconstructive surgery, took out my endometriosis, and I was able to get pregnant 2 years later. I had Jet, and then I struggled with secondary infertility, had 2 other surgeries after that. And now I'm in menopause, which is good news because I no longer suffer from painful periods.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, you didn't think that menopause would get into your podcast, huh?
No. It wasn't on my script. It definitely was not one of the questions I was going to ask you. Okay. So that brought you back, but you stayed, or did you return after your surgery? What was going on?
Everybody advises not to go back because of my health, and I really wanted to have a child. I was in my early 30s, had this surgery, and I thought if there's any shot of me getting pregnant, I better stay in the States. And also, we were in Vietnam for a while. We were always prepping for the local to take over. So it's the time for local disciples to lead and shine, for us to step aside. So we decided to stay and to focus on my health. And I was able to get pregnant a year after that. And then Dad went back to school and got his MBA. And so we had to kind of, restart our lives here in the States.
Okay, let's talk about that. A restart. He went to Pepperdine, got a master's MBA. And so then what did you do? Like you went into banking. How'd you get into banking? Tell me what the process was.
So I was always working, right? Even in Vietnam, because Vietnam was an underground church. So I did corporate training and marketing, always doing full-time professional job and do church at the same time. So my resume didn't have a lot of gaps, but it was not the best time to look for a job in 2003. And I did not have any luck in marketing jobs. So I was, at a crossroad thinking, what am I going to do? And Dad was a corporate banker for Credit Lyonnais when he was in Ho Chi Minh City. And he said, hey, Natalie, you're going to be a really great banker because you're very personable, you're good with numbers, you're very smart. And then I said, I don't know anything about banking, and I'm not going to start as a teller, no way, or personal banker. And he said, well, just look around. But he planted a seed in my mind to think about banking. And so I was looking, and then at the time, Bank of America was hiring leaders that are in non-banking field that they wanted to train them to become bank managers. So I got hired right away, and I went into training for 6 months. I love and hate Bank of America. I love that they picked me up at that time, but I hated that it's such a circus over there, because it's crazy. It's one of the largest money center banks in the world. And after my training program, they threw me one of the top branches to manage in Manhattan Beach. And it was crazy. And I was there for about 10 months leading, being a bank manager straight out from training. It was a very humbling experience, but my team was very supportive. I learned a lot from my people, and I also treated them really, really well and respectfully. And I gave them raises that they never had. I was like, might as well, I'm here. And then after that, I was recruited to open a de novo office for IndyMac, which it turned to One West, and then I was gone. And then after that, I was recruited by the bank that I'm at right now, Western Alliance Bank.
Western Alliance Bank. I thought you were with Torrey Pines. Is that?
Yeah, Torrey Pines Bank is a division of Western Alliance Bank.
Got it.
Same bank.
Okay, so
yeah.
how many years have you worked with that company?
I've been with Western Alliance Bank for about 13 years now.
Okay, you've risen up really fast. I mean, when you share with me what you're doing, it's like, whoa. What's been the key to your success in the secular world? In your business environment.
I think that my life I have lived and served in 6 different churches in 6 different countries in Asia. I lived in Tokyo, and while I lived in Tokyo, I traveled to many different countries and worked in different environments. I have seen the poorest and I've seen the richest. I think my life experience equips me to be somewhat an interesting person to chat with. And in the private banking world, your clients really appreciate a banker that is not just a simple person who's been in banking all her life. There's a lot of things about my clients that I could relate to. But the big thing is because of my life experience, I'm not easily impressed by anything. Nothing really impresses me except spiritual things, right? So when I meet with someone, walk into their gigantic mansion in Holmby Hills or Birch Streets, in Hollywood Hills, walked into this, $130 million mansion, having a meeting, I'm just not. It's just another house to me. I don't go in and say, "Oh my gosh, Mariah Carey used to live here." It is a true story. I went to a former Mariah Carey's house for one of my meetings, and everyone was, at least a billionaire, and I just did not feel intimidated because it didn't mean that much to me, and I think that helps me. And I'm very honest, very authentic. And when I meet with a prospect and they say, "Hey, is this the right bank for me? Can you do this for me?" And if it's a no, I just tell them it's not a good fit.
Yeah.
I think, JP Morgan Private Bank is a better fit for you. I'm just very honest, and I'm not afraid to say no to people, and I'm also not afraid to ask. If it's something that I want, I would just simply tell them, "Hey, what about this?" So just being honest, being yourself, being authentic is all the virtues that a good disciple should have. I embrace those, and I think that's what makes me successful is all the spiritual virtues that I learned from being a disciple.
Wow. That's awesome.
It's not about skills.
How do you stay strong in a secular environment? How do you keep the fire burning, so to speak?
Well, like I said, like the scripture said, don't be overawed, by the world's riches, and a heart of contentment is great gain, right? In the New Testament. Um, I am a certified financial planner and have a master's in financial planning. I do a ton of financial workshops for the city of Los Angeles, for a lot of nonprofits, and for the church. And I took a deep dive in studying all the scriptures about money and riches. Because if I, I'm the head of private client group in my bank. So if I were to do this, I need to get this right, right? And so I took a deep dive in studying this for years. And the more I study, the more I realize money is important. And if you can handle money correctly, you can be set free. I'm not talking about financial freedom in terms of you have so much that you can just do whatever. I'm talking about having a healthy relationship with money and material things. When you can get that, then everything else, you can still really enjoy your worldly success, but not be too caught up with it.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah, it's impressed me over the years. I mean, I remember visiting you when you lived in Culver City. You lived in a townhome, like in a condo complex. It wasn't super fancy. I mean, it was enough space for you and your family, but it certainly wasn't lavish. It was in essentially nondescript in Culver City. But I was really impressed because I knew you guys were doing well financially, and yet it was a relatively modest place to live. I've been impressed with your control over money. Just to finish it out, what advice would you give to a person who wants to make this life
Focus on what you can control and stay really, really close to God on your own and drown out all the noises. And let me elaborate a little bit. Our church is not perfect. Our church is amazing, but it has a lot of problems and a lot of issues and a lot of leaders that need to grow, and the members need to grow. Don't wait until the church is at a place where you like. Thrive on your own. There's a lot of things you can control on your own relationship with God, your own walk with God, your own relationship with your spouses, significant others, your family, your kids, your parents. Take really good care of yourself spiritually, professionally, physically, emotionally, and enjoy this amazing life that God has given you, even in the midst of challenges.
That's awesome. Great advice. Natalie, thank you so much for your time. It's just great to talk to you. Thank you for your friendship over the years. Pam and I love spending time with you guys. I know we spent a weekend in Sedona this last fall. It was so much fun just to hang out with you guys.
Yeah.
All the best to
Yeah.
both of you guys. Here's how you can help support the program. First, let your friends know about the podcast. Second, read one of my books, either How to Plant and Grow a Church or Courage, How to Make This Life Count. Finally, you can support the program with a gift today. The link is in the show notes, because my goal is to inspire you to make this life count, live a no regrets life, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Have a great day and make this life count.